In today's LEGO City update, I'm finally having the lighthouse in place, connecting the harbor area with the rest of the LEGO City. But before we proceed, we have to complete the harbor basin itself. First of all, I'm building this wall right here and then connecting it using a staircase to the upper platform. However, I encountered technical difficulties right away because there you can see it. I had a small gap left right in the angle where I placed the wall. I now managed to cleverly solve that by filling up the gap using a 2x1 rain gutter element. Let's now focus on the main task, building the lighthouse itself. I initially experimented with various different building techniques, including this awesome round design, but honestly this didn't work out at all. So I decided to completely start from scratch and came up with this awesome basic structure. It's built out of hinges in a circle with external brick modifieds all the way around, covered now in flat tiles in order to achieve this closed-up angle. This is now the progress every few hours when building. Obviously, this is quite difficult to film, but I still wasn't quite satisfied because I needed to make one final improvement, which is what I'm doing right now. I had to cut out a small corner to ensure the lighthouse was able to connect the upper platform with the lower one with the harbor itself, which was the main goal of the lighthouse. And just look at how incredibly satisfying this is. Of course, in order to now properly connect the lighthouse with the harbor itself, I have to remove all the studs, replace them with flat tiles, only have a few studs right on the corner in order to connect it, and now this area is complete and we can now continue building the glass dome as well as the roof for the lighthouse itself. In order to keep the overall round shape of the lighthouse, I was now using a slot building technique to build this black circle for the roof. Before adding that, I'm installing the glass dome, which is basically just a rolled up garage door, and finished off with inverted 1x2 rounded plates on top because I need to be able to connect it with studs. You'll see that in just a second as soon as I've added these bars, which I thought just look a bit more interesting. And now for the dome itself, there you can see these two studs from the brick modified I've added earlier, the dome on top, and now this then finishes off the lighthouse. I'll comment on why exactly I didn't choose to add red stripes to the lighthouse towards the end of the video, but this is how the lighthouse integrates into the city, and in order to further integrate that into the city, we of course have to add a bit of vegetation and finish up this area behind the lighthouse. I didn't want to add too much vegetation because this area is directly in front, and before I'm adding the next building, it's time to add another tree, which I built using one of these more complicated building techniques, but which looks absolutely awesome. And this is the new building I was talking about. I'll show you in just a second. Inside this tree, I also added a small squirrel, which is quite a new, interesting Lego piece. And when it comes to the new building, I thought this might be a small hut where you can rent boats directly down at the harbor. This is also where I'm now continuing to build because first of all, I have to add the fence so people don't fall down onto the harbor and onto the concrete of the harbor. And another side effect you get when adding a fence is the awesome contrast. Just right there you can see that as soon as I'm finishing off the staircase. I don't know what it is, but I absolutely love this contrast when you have large areas of light bluish gray and then a few black spots on top, just as I'm finishing off this area right there. Next up, although the harbor itself is finished, I now have to connect it with the future beach. And I'm doing that by first of all continuing with the cliffs. And for the rock structure, you know me by now I guess, I always like to add certain bricks that are built in on the side, which makes the entire thing look a bit more interesting. And also you can see that right there, I've now extended this upper platform onto the rock face because that now connects different modules. And since this looks like a sort of viewing platform, I decided to add a small telescope right on top. Next up, it's of course time to continue with more vegetation. I now decided to add these triple leaves to limb elements, build a curved tree out of that, and these are these little awesome building techniques I love to experiment with when adding vegetation, and especially here in front I can use more complicated building techniques. For example, right there you can see that with this curved stud I was adding and then placing a limb element on top. Just small little experimental building techniques. One last thing I had to finish off is on the other side of this area where I've added a tree. I thought another tree, a second one, looks good as well because, well, otherwise this entire area is still a bit too gray to my liking. Once again, I added a diagonal in these flat tiles because that always looks awesome. Finished up everything and we can continue on the other side of the harbor, which is where I still had one major problem I had to get rid of. And you can see that when I'm starting to continue with this tiling towards the front of the staircase, there is this small annoying gap, and honestly everybody was triggered by that in the comment section, me included. We have to get rid of that, and what I was now doing is using one of these modified plates I attached a flat tile to, and this now perfectly, although it's a bit illegal, fills up this half stud gap that was remaining in between the two modules. Another thing we of course need to focus on is adding more details, and this is now in the other part of the harbor where I had these market stalls. You can see I bought one of these printed milk bricks, which is of course awesome for my milk market stall, obviously. Then another printed Lego piece I added is one of these ticket tiles, which was missing for the ticket stand for the tram line. Exchanged that, and another piece I had also shown you last video are these different net pieces, and I now simply placed them throughout the entire harbor, also right there on my little ship mock. And now of course that the harbor is finished, I absolutely need to design and build more boats. I'm quite aware of that, but that's a topic for a different video. Now I want to go back to the lighthouse, because that's where we still have to talk about the most important thing, which is of course adding the lighting itself. The other day I was now once again visiting the Lego factory and bought what I normally wouldn't really buy, Lego Technic pieces. And this is of course for the mechanism of the lighthouse, which I quickly want to show you how exactly I want to add that. What is absolutely awesome about this lighthouse is that I have so much empty space on top. Right here you can see that there's more than enough space to add different sort of Technic gears, and also these giant axes I bought. I mean, just look at this in comparison to the height of the lighthouse. So this is an awesome way to have the motor somewhere down here and then transfer the entire mechanism and motion to the top, where I'll then add the lights as well as a turning mirror. And then as I visited the Lego factory, of course, I restocked my entire collection once again, because believe it or not, with the current building progress, especially here in the city, but also in the Wild West mock, I'm burning through these pieces like there's no tomorrow. It's honestly a bit crazy, but this then results in me having to restock everything. Otherwise, this happened to me the other day, I'm honestly running out of pieces. Oh yeah, and this is by the way what the floor currently looks like here. I'm still sorting through everything, but this will take me another few days, I think. And now back to the city, and before I'll show you today's before and after picture, I still have to show you one or two little details I added. First of all, what I want to point out is the steering wheel right underneath the roof of this boat renting building, which now obviously then also indicates that I want to add a few more surfboards right next to it, so it becomes a bit more obvious. And of course, boats are still missing. Now, when it comes to this section where I had to fill up this little half plate gap that was remaining, I can simply extend that building technique along the entire corner right there. At the other end of the harbor, I'm still thinking about how exactly I want to connect these two rock faces with each other, with a possible beach in between. And with that, I think it's time for today's before and after picture. First of all, this is what it looked like before today's update, obviously without the lighthouse and still the harbor unfinished. And now afterwards, major difference once again. I'm really satisfied with the progress over the last few updates, and I really hope that I can keep the pace up. And with that being said, that's it for today's video. I really hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you again in the next one.